Well, just the other day, I was on my way to the suburbs, and I was doing a review with a client, very wealthy client, and he lets you know how wealthy he is. He's one of those guys. And so I prepared myself in the car, like I said, okay, Mike, you're going to listen to him talk all about himself. You're going to listen to him talk about how much money he has, and he's going to thank me, and I'm going to say, you're welcome. And that's all we're going to talk about is basically him and his money. And we did for 2 hours. And by the time I got in the car, I was ready to go to a bar. But the point is, with this gospel today, and Sirach really reminds us of this. In the book of Sirach, he says, hey, look, gotta keep repenting. When you sin and you fall down, you gotta keep going. You gotta pick yourself back up. You gotta get into the confessional. You gotta change your life. We're constantly in this state of changing our hearts, aren't we? So just the other day, I was just telling my wife, just a month ago, I developed this new sin. I've never struggled with that before. Now all of a sudden, it's like a revelation. I'm constantly repenting, constantly changing my heart and trying to get as close as we possibly can to God. That's what Sirach is writing about. That's what it's all about. Jesus reminds us that heaven only comes through him, right? You can work your fingers to the bone. Sarah can work her fingers to the bone at the food pantry, but boy, if she doesn't believe in Jesus, she's in trouble, isn't she? That's the bad part, right? That's the bad part for those people who are like, I'm going to work my way to heaven. No. God wants you to love him. And how do we love Jesus? By showing him how we love him, right? That's why we work at the food pantry. That's why we donate our money. That's why we tithe to the church. That's why we help out at charities, right? That's why when we see a homeless person in Rockford, we give them our winter jacket and our hat and our gloves and everything else, right? That's why we do those things, right? Because we love Christ in our heart. And it's easy when you have a lot of money and you have a lot of possessions. It's very simple to all of a sudden replace what's in your heart from God to those possessions, right? It's not a sin to be wealthy. It's not a sin to have possessions, but the sin of it is where your heart is at. If your heart is in those possessions, like my client, and all his money, and that's where his heart is, that's where the sin is. When you hoard that money, when you are selfish with that money, when you don't share that money with people in need, that's where the sin comes in, right? And that's where Jesus really cautions us to be careful, because when we have wealth and we have that money, it's a little bit of a trickery from the devil, isn't it? Because he goes, I'll tear them away from God and I'll give them wealth instead. And that wealth will over-pursue the pursuant of Jesus Christ, right? So that's where we have to be careful. That's what we have to analyze in our lives. And it's a great day to do it, isn't it? We're coming into Ash Wednesday in 2 days. So let's think about that a little bit. We had that moment of silence. Is there anything that we're struggling with in our possessions? Is there a possession of ours that we're just as like our little China doll, and we're like, we just love that thing more than we love God? Is there anything out there that we just are like totally attached to? And lastly, anything keeping us away from Jesus? Anything? A sin, a person, a possession, whatever it is. Let's contemplate that today. Let's stand and offer our prayers.